Hi, everybody. Welcome to this latest episode of Real Talk with Rick. Today, I bring in Jim Schedin. Jim Schedin is the city's zoning administrator. It's a very interesting job. Jim works out of the police department, and he deals with pretty much every city code issue related to quality of life and enforcement on all kinds of properties within Eden Prairie. So he's going to talk a little bit about what his job's like and what he does day to day, and how he has to go out on numerous calls and complaints related to those quality of life code issues. But he's also going to share a couple interesting story about how he got to that job and how he got to the city of Eden Prairie. He's been with us here for 32 years. And then he'll also have some, really good advice for us at the end of the episode on what his journey has showed him that probably makes us all better residents of the city and people involved in the city. So here is my conversation with Eden Prairie zoning administrator, Jim Schedin. Jim Schedin, thank you for coming into the podcast today.
You're very welcome.
All right, good. Oh, you got a voice for this. You sound good. So this will come off well.
Well, my background was kind of originally in radio.
Yeah, so that's good. You've got a voice for this. This is nice. When you're not doing radio or weren't doing radio, you are the City of Eden Prairie zoning administrator. What does that mean? Tell us about your job.
What does that mean? I think a lot of people don't know what it is the heck I do. Sometimes that's me as well. The official spiel is that my position acts as sort of a watchdog on the beauty of the community. So I'm charged with ensuring that homes and businesses meet certain community standards, and I do that by responding to complaints and performing inspections and educating residents and businesses, and if necessary, enforcing the code. That's the official spiel. Actual description is I play the role of a mediator or counselor or psychiatrist or enforcer between neighbors and businesses and the city with the goal of resolving all of life's little irritations.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's just day in, day out dealing with little irritating complaints that just bother everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say I've been here 11 years, and I've been involved in a few of those, and bringing to your attention, bringing attention through other people in the community, and you are great at that. That's you have a talent for that few have. So I'm happy you keep doing it. Some people don't necessarily can do this for the long haul, because you are sometimes being the enforcer can be difficult.
I'm a glutton for punishment.
Okay.
I actually had a woman yesterday tell me, "You don't have a very fun job, do you?" Which made me laugh, because I hear that a lot.
Yeah, right.
But I don't think it's that bad. It's just I have the patience. So
yeah, no, that's good. Code. You said code, so that's a lot of different stuff, because we have a lot of code, right?
We sure do.
So
yeah.
I mean, it's everything from just how your yard is kept, how your home is kept, how noisy you are, how much equipment or vehicles or storage you have in your yard, how close maybe buildings and accessory buildings or other things are close to each other, right?
I'm impressed. You have a good understanding.
A little bit. I better have a good understanding. There's so many, wide variety. And again, people might gravitate to the residential, which comes up a lot, but there's also a lot of stuff with commercial and industrial property as well.
Mm-hmm. Light glare, decibel limits. I forgot to throw in honeybees and chickens.
Honeybees and chickens. Yeah, those are two new things. New things that we've had. People, and I think it's appreciated that people have the ability to have apiaries and chicken coops in Eden Prairie. We allow that, but their registrations or being the people that get that up and going come through you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right now we have about 25 registered chicken keepers, and probably a handful that are flying under the radar.
Okay.
And we've had probably close to 40 people take a go at beekeeping, but right now we have only 15.
Okay.
So a lot of people try it and say, this is maybe not for me.
I think people also have called you about, can I keep sheep and goats and
right.
exotic animals, right?
Yep. Can I bring some goats in to munch on the buckthorn in the backyard type things? And I heard Minneapolis allows goats or sheeps or potbelly pigs.
Potbelly pigs.
Yeah, none of that's allowed here.
No, we did allow the preserve to have a goat eat their buckthorn, but that wasn't, can I have a goat in my backyard to eat my own buckthorn?
Yeah, and that didn't work out too well. So
yeah, I always argue that the buckthorn's the last thing that they eat because they eat everything.
Mm-hmm.
They eat everything.
Right.
And then they'll take the buckthorn with it, but anything else you might have had might be gone as well.
Right.
So we're going to work backwards, but before we do that, talking about the current job situation.
Yeah.
So then it doesn't sound like a typical day. You don't have a typical day, but what might a normal day look like for you?
Normal day?
Yeah. Average day.
Well, not many people know this, but I start my day at home about 8 a.m., and that involves going through emails, voicemails from the previous night, taking notes, sometimes even writing out ideas for reports. Real interesting stuff. But then when I get to work, that's when I get busy. So when I get in, what do? I go through any other emails or voicemails that came through, kind of make a general idea of where I need to go that day. Trying to make sure that I travel kind of in a cyclical route so that I'm not running willy-nilly all over. I do some background checks on the addresses that I'm going to go to, make sure for my own personal safety there haven't been any SWAT call-outs or psychiatric medicals or guns or drugs or anything like that, because that's helpful to know because that's happened before.
Yeah. Not a lot of people might think about that, but if you're going to a neighbor's calling in another neighbor on a major, violation, you don't know what is actually possibly going on, or are you being put in the middle of something that might be scary.
And I don't go through the same training that officers have gone through. I don't carry the same type of safety equipment. So my biggest asset, I always say, is my silver tongue.
Yeah.
And my legs, if they can run fast enough if I need to. But it all boils down to communications and knowing your audience and adjusting your communication styles. And again, communication is the cornerstone of what I do, because you have to get buy-in from the people you're talking to in order to gain their cooperation. So that's what I do. I go out, I do my inspections, I take my photos, I meet with folks, I talk to folks, and then I come back, and the rest of my day is sitting at my desk typing reports, downloading photos, sending out violation notices, answering more phone calls, and then doing the same thing all over again the next day.
Yeah, and I think, but they're all different, because you remind me, I think the last one that I brought to your attention was the neighbor complaining about another neighbor's, was it their RV that was like, this is blocking the street or too close to the street.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got a list of you might have 15 places that you have to deal with that day or that you're going to, but one might be, someone's got the boat parked in the front yard in the driveway, thinking they can't even do that. Yes, they can.
Mm-hmm.
That's an education piece. But they need to be, so many feet from the sidewalk or the property line, and you actually go out and measure that.
Right.
And you take pictures.
Yep.
And then you send me the pictures with the measurements that then I turn around and send to the resident, letting them know that we followed up. Thank you for your call. I know a few other neighbors called in, but this is where it sits. And by the way, that person said, thank you for the quick response. That was great. Now I'm up to speed.
Yep.
But that was, that took you some time.
Yeah. And there's other times where you'll find me 20 below zero standing on the side of a road at 11 at night taking decibel readings of commercial equipment to see if it violates code, or standing in somebody's backyard after dusk taking lumen readings from their LED lights to see if it's creating light glare that exceeds a certain foot candle as measured from the property line. Yeah. It's just a whole cornucopia of issues.
Yeah. I think one question you get a lot is, who called on me?
Mm-hmm.
I want to know. I want to know my accuser, right? And we go under. These are all anonymous,
right? There's a Minnesota state statute that basically says when a person files a complaint against, quote, real property, unquote, their identity has to be protected. And I don't know that a lot of people know that, so I remind them of that, because a lot of times they're hesitant to talk to me because they don't want anybody to know it was them. And I'm like, you don't have to worry about that. We'll protect that. So that helps.
Yes. No, I get that quite a bit. So what would be the most exciting part of what you do then?
Of my current job?
Yes. Yeah.
Because the most exciting part, the part that I enjoy the most is, believe it or not, talking to residents. I really enjoy that. And it's not just lip service when I go out there. I really do enjoy talking to residents, especially if I'm lucky enough to get an old timer. And by old timer, I mean somebody that's been here 20, 30, sometimes 40 years. They're like little nuggets of wisdom. And I think they're surprised when they learn that I've been with the city for 32 years, and then the stories come out. And that's how you build relationships, is just talking to people. And they'll say, "Gal, you're pretty nice for a government worker."
Oh boy.
And I'm like, we're all just people. We're your neighbors. We're your nephew or your uncle. I think so many people have a preconceived idea of what government worker, who they are, and so we're your neighbors.
And for you to enjoy doing that probably goes to what we talked about earlier, and why you still find excitement in doing that if you're engaging with residents and enjoying that, and you're out there, enforcing our city code. That's right. That's great.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to, didn't mention my first career with Eden Prairie. First 17 years I was a 911 dispatcher, and one of the main rules of that is brevity. Get on the phone, get the pertinent information, get off the phone. Quick, brief, to the point. And so to be able to go out into the community and have the luxury of talking to people with no time limit, it's just great.
That, so yeah, you're pretty much a split career, 32 years. A little bit more than half was a dispatcher. You said 17 years, the last 15 as zoning administrator. So tell me, how did that transition happen then?
The transition from one job to the next? Right. I was very good at dispatching, and I loved the job. I still love the job, but I had one child who came along, and as you know, for police and dispatchers, it's nights, weekends, holidays. You miss a lot of family functions. You miss tucking your kid in, reading them stories, and I knew that this was my shot because it became evident we were only going to have one kid. This was my only shot to be a dad. So that's when I started. I didn't want to leave Eden Prairie. I love Eden Prairie, so I started looking for available jobs or possibilities, and that's when Jean Johnson, who had my job for 30-something years before me, started making indications that she might be considering leaving. Mm-hmm. I'm like, well, who is she and what does she do and what's this job all about?
Yeah.
And so I asked to job shadow her, and I thought, God, this is kind of interesting. And I ended up making I think a cheat sheet of codes for my fellow dispatchers. And eventually one day she just pulled the plug. I think she gave like a 2-week notice, if I remember. And I think the city kind of panicked and went, oh my gosh, we need a zoning person. Does anybody know how to do her job? And that's when I kind of raised my hand and said, I've got my ducks in a row.
I'm ready.
Yeah. So
I'm ready.
That afforded me the luxury of then being home every night for dinner, reading to my kid, tucking him in, going to his band. I mean, everything I wanted. I got everything I wanted. I got to be there for my kid. I got to stay with Eden Prairie. I got to do a job that's fun and interesting. So
no, that's great. That's a good, because you're right. Like even for police officers, dispatchers, varied hours, different times, and there are certain positions that are the 7 to 3, 9 to 5, 8 to 4:30. Obviously, like you talked about, though, you're still out with that light meter at 11 o'clock. You're still, but that's not every day, and that's not on a regular basis. So this is interesting, because do you think your dispatching job helped kind of lay the groundwork for being a good zoning administrator then?
Absolutely. Yeah. You establish so many contacts as a dispatcher because you have to know after hours who to call when. And you're kind of holed up in that one room, but you do get to know certain people in different departments. Yeah. And you have to have a lot of answers for a lot of people. And then as you transition into my job, as I mentioned, I do background checks on addresses to see if there's safety concerns. I had all of that information, access to files, whatnot, running criminal history checks, stuff like that. So it was a seamless transition. The only challenge was the learning curve was really steep.
Okay.
So,
but you took calls as a dispatcher, I'm sure, on some of these quality of life issues that may turn into items that the zoning administrator would follow up on later on.
Yeah, I think a lot of those quality of life issues were handed off to officers who may or may not have had a good answer to give people at the time. And that's where my job has kind of bloomed or blossomed into. What I get a lot is I'm reluctant to call the police department because you guys have better things to do with your time. And I always tell them, no, officers have better things to do with their time. This is my job. It's what I do full time. So you're talking to the right person. I've got all the time in the world to help you with your problem.
Yeah,
so
that's great. So then, in terms of some of that work, can you tell us an interesting story or two in your time here in the code enforcement world. A couple anecdotes.
Yeah,
We don't have to use names or addresses.
Right. And my current job is much, much less interesting than 911 dispatching.
And you could tell one of those. That's fine.
If I could remember. It's so long ago.
Oh,
No, I mean, in terms of interesting zoning enforcement issues, oh boy. I did have an interesting situation once where somebody called me and they said, "Hey, I got your violation notice in the mail. I'm a little confused. Can we talk about it?" And sure. Well, what's your name and your address? And I look it up and I'm like, I don't show that I sent you a violation notice. Yeah, I got one. I go, well, what does it say? And they read it to me and it was signed by me. And I said, that's a letter I send out. Give me your name and address again. And what's this about? And it was about, trash container screening or something. So it became, can you take a picture of this violation notice and email it to me so I can take a look at it? And they did. And I looked at it and I said, that was a rough draft of a violation notice that I made 12 years ago. How did that get out to the public? And the only thing I could think of is maybe 12 years ago, somebody contacted me and said, "Hey, what do you do when somebody doesn't screen their trash containers?" Well, I send them a violation notice. Well, can I get a copy of one? Well, for data privacy, no, but I could send you a generic one
sample
that said, resident at 1234 Main Street, whatever. Yeah. Anyway, that's what this said.
John Doe, right. 1234 Main Street.
It said John Doe.
Anywhere USA.
And so my brain is reeling. I'm like, how did this get out? And was this in an envelope? No. Where was it? In the mailbox. Did it have a stamp? No. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm pretty sure that's a federal issue. You can't put something in a mailbox without a stamp.
I think I know what happened here.
Well,
okay.
So then I go talk to some investigators, and they're a little concerned, and they start bringing up ideas of felony aggravated forgery. Jim, this could be felony aggravated forgery. There's an imposter of you out there. And as I'm thinking about that, 2 days later, I get a call from a woman. She says, "Hey, I got your violation notice, and I got some questions." And I go, "Violation? Okay, where are you calling from?" She gave me the address, and it was in the same general neighborhood. And I go, "Let me guess. Is this about trash container screen?" "Yeah." And I go, "Was it placed in your mailbox just by itself?" "Yes." "Is it addressed to John Doe, 1234 Main Street?" She's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, okay, this is I've got a doppelganger out there.
You've got a vigilante. You've got someone who wants to do your job without calling you.
Yeah, so now I'm really interested of who's doing this, why, and now we're talking to this city attorney about, can we pursue felony aggravated charges? And the answer was no, because there's no forgery. It's simply nobody's altered a name. Nobody's signed your name on it because my name was on there signed electronically. So the answer is no. So then I call these two people back. I have to put closure to this somehow. Tell me, where are your trash containers normally? Yeah. Well, down at the end of the driveway at the street. Yeah. Are they there all week long? Yeah. And I'm like, well, it wasn't me that sent you this. Whoever did knew what they were doing, because you actually are kind of in violation. So if you could, follow the rules that are on that, you'll be fine. Okay. And that was that. But it was just, I guess that stands out as an interesting. I had a imposter out there somewhere.
You had someone who could have simply called you.
Right.
And said this string of, which you get a lot, this string of addresses is they're keeping the garbage cans out a lot. Instead, they got your generic letter from a long time ago, and they took matters into their own hands. Yeah, there's interesting stuff, because I think once, maybe this is when I worked in Hopkins, that somebody came in with their violation notice for like peeling paint all over their home, and they said that they ignored the first two letters because they thought that the city was playing a joke on them. That can't be that's not a real notice, or someone was playing a joke, that it's someone was making up notes just to have fun with their neighbor. No, that's us, and you've got a major peeling paint issue. It's not a joke. It really came from us. So it's interesting stuff like that.
Yeah. I don't know. I could tell you about Smurf Creek. That was one.
What's Smurf Creek?
Smurf Creek, that was my very first year doing this. Got a call of somebody's dumping paint in a wooded area, and it was just a vague description up off of Highway 62. First glance, I went up there. I couldn't find what they're doing. Second glance, I decided to do some bushwhacking through some thickets and forest, and lo and behold, I stumbled upon a creek, or maybe a drainage ditch, that was fluorescent Smurf blue.
Wow.
I mean, it looked like Willy Wonka. I mean, it was just like Technicolor. My brain is trying to process what I'm looking at. And I follow it back through the woods to a culvert that runs under Baker Road. And I can't for the life of me figure where is this coming from. Well, we traced it back to a business that had repainted their basketball courts, and they had extra blue paint left over. So they just went behind the building and, did what everybody normally would do, which is just pour your paint right into the drainage.
Into the drainage
right.
ditch, just
and,
like your extra oil after an oil change right down the storm sewer.
And, I'm new to the job, so I'm like, oh my gosh, how do I deal with this? But Leslie Stovring, who was at the time the environmental coordinator, showed up. She made a few calls. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency showed up, the Watershed District. They basically said, who initiated this? Me. Okay, well, you're no longer in charge here. We are. So they just took over the call and dealt with it. But that was one of those things where it's just jarring. You're in the middle of the woods, and here's this Smurf Blue Creek. Crazy.
Wow. So let's you talked about the dispatcher piece. Let's retrace some of your steps. So actually, and this is well documented, how you move from dispatcher to zoning administrator within the police department of the city. But zoning, the position you have actually is not always in a police department. So I think that, people should know that a lot of times the zoning piece, the code enforcement piece might be in the planning department, community development department of a city. But, it's interesting. People here always tell me that they really appreciate that it's in the police department because a lot of stuff comes in and through the PD. But where I used to work, 2 jobs I had before here, code enforcement was not an employee within PD. So I think that we have it really, I think that's a really smart move here. But so yes, you come to being dispatcher. Then how do you get to be a dispatcher? What brings you to that career, to that job in the first place?
Well, it kind of goes back to college. So I started out at St. Cloud my first year. I was going to major in this new thing people were saying was going to take off called computers.
Sure.
Like that is the wave of the future. I found out pretty quickly that's not for me. So
what did they call it? Because I think our ages are not that far off, but I guess I had computer class in high school.
You're younger than me.
Well,
yeah.
I had typing class in high school. I didn't have computer
I.
class. Okay, I had typing class. I didn't take it though, and I should have. But they were doing basic computer language. But at St. Cloud, did they call it? They didn't call it information systems or
no?
What did they call it? Computers?
I think it was computers.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
First year I took generals anyway. So
yeah.
So then I transferred to UW-Madison, where my best friend was, and I still. I don't know what I want to take. You look through the handbook. Communications, that seems reasonably vague. You could do just about anything.
Yeah.
So,
history, communication.
Yeah, so I'll sign up for that. So I took those, and those were the classes I did the best in, which was radio programming and production, television programming and production. I was a disc jockey at the local student radio station, broadcasting at 1.5 watts.
Okay.
So
did that get across? That's across campus, but no further. Didn't get across campus.
I don't even think it made it out of the building.
Barely
to be
out of the building.
honest.
Okay.
Because
it
was really fun.
Well, by the way, though, college radio. That was a big deal in the '70s and especially the '80s, because that's where a lot of some of the music you couldn't hear anywhere else came from, or talk shows. But I thought Madison would probably have had a pretty well-known college radio station. But you were at the other one.
I was at the. Well, there's a long story behind that. Apparently, the station said some disparaging remarks about university admin, and so they lost all funding. So this was student-run only.
Okay.
And the FCC also had something to say about it too, so they had to keep the wattage down.
Okay.
But yeah, my goal was to expose as many students as I could to my alternative music, which everybody knew was the coolest kind of music at the time. So I was totally into the 80s alternative music scene.
Yeah.
I mean, I lived it. So long story short, near my senior year, I was working 3 jobs. I was a bartender at the student union. I don't know if you've ever been to Madison's.
I've been to that union many times.
To the Rathskeller.
I have been there, yes.
How magical is that place?
It's very magical. It's still magical.
And the terrace overlooking Lake.
Terrace is great. I've been to the terrace. I worked a summer in Madison as well between years in college, in addition to growing up only 2 hours from there. So I'm very familiar with all this. I didn't know that you went there, but that's awesome.
Yeah. So I had the bartending job. I was working for the state's biggest AM radio station. We broadcast the Bob Costa's show live from Runyon's on Fifth Avenue via satellite. So that was a fun thing. And then my third job was a job called Answer Madison, which was an answering service. And we answered for businesses, not just locally, but all over the nation. And one of those businesses was Georgia Bell down in Georgia. And I was working one night, and it was after hours, and I got a phone call, and I answered, Georgia Bell, can I help you? So whoever was calling Georgia Bell didn't know that their call was being answered by some young kid up in Madison. And it was a guy working for the telephone company. I can't remember his name. Let's call him Billy Bob. He says, this is Billy Bob. I'm on rural Route 12, mile marker 7. I just came down off a telephone pole, and I've been bit by a rattler, and I'm losing consciousness. I need help. And prior to that, I'm answering for psychologists and whatever, saying, Miss Johnson is not available. Can I take a message?
This is your first 911
call. After hours.
This is your first 911 call.
So I followed the protocol of who to call and whatnot, and didn't think anything of it until about an hour later. My boss came in and said, Jim, can I get you to unplug and meet me in my office? And I went, uh-oh, what did I do? And she came in and she said, you took a call about an hour ago for Georgia Bell? And I'm like, yeah. She said, I just want to let you know that the president of Georgia Bell called to personally thank Answer Madison, because whoever took that call, because of their quickness, they were able to get an ambulance out there, and they saved this guy's life.
Yes.
And I thought, oh my gosh, that is cool. I mean, this guy is, he's nobody to me, but, he's loved by probably his wife or his kids or his parents. This is a real human being's life, and I just played a part in helping save it. So I kind of just filed that away and went about my business of trying to get into the radio industry. I had an interview up here with Minnesota Public Radio, tried to become the broadcast council operator for them. I think I was second on their list. But in the meantime, I saw an opening for 911 dispatcher at the city of Edina. And I kind of have a history that most people don't know. My godfather, Wayne Bennett, is the longest-serving chief of police for Edina, 1955 to 75. Mm-hmm. And if you want to go back to the 1600s, my great-grandfather, 7 times removed, was the police constable and county prosecutor in Dalarna, Sweden.
Oh,
so
wow.
we've kind of got a history. Yeah,
Shadeen from Sweden. Yeah,
I
knew you
anyway,
had the Edina background.
So then I did the dispatch bit at Edina, but it was part-time, and when the opening for Eden Prairie, they were opening a brand new 911 center, hiring 6 new dispatchers. I was 7th on the list, by the way. I didn't get chosen, but thank goodness the last guy on the list called Gary Thurkelson and said, I kind of changed my mind. I'm going to do something else with my career. So they called me, and, originally it was going to be a 3 to 5 year gig, and now 32 years later, here I am, and I joke I only have myself to blame for that, but it's been a good ride and very interesting, and I found that I had a whole bunch of skills that I didn't know that I possessed in terms of communication and talking with people, and basically just a whole heck of a lot of satisfaction when you know that you've helped somebody out at probably could be potentially one of the worst days of their life, and you were the voice on the other end that helped them out, or the guy who shows up and helps them solve their problem that's been eating away at them for years, and you're able to solve it within like 2 weeks. It's cool.
Yeah. It's interesting because this idea of going from communications / radio broadcasting to dispatching, I mean, you just totally connected those dots in a really neat way. Was there ever, and then how the public service piece of it, but was there ever a time when you were in the dispatching that you thought, I still might want to follow that whole college communications piece at all? Or were you pretty much, I'm all in the minute you were a dispatcher?
No, I always thought, not always, but in the beginning, I kind of thought that's why I thought 3 to 5 years, because I really want to get back into radio. But radio is a tough business. The hours are terrible. The pay is terrible. And you could show up one day and say, hey, we switched formats. We're country now, so you guys are all out of work.
Right. Well, and this is probably, if we're talking about the 80s, it's before huge, what now is everything's owned by large corporations.
Right.
Clear Channel or whatever that is. But I want to go back to the 80s alternative rock scene that you were like deeply immersed in.
Yes.
So is it the alternative, all that music that I saw on MTV in the 80s that was huge at that time that was alternative? Or are you talking about just stuff that a lot of people wouldn't even know? Give me some examples of the alternative 80s music scene that you were deeply immersed in.
Well, I think maybe I shot you an email a while back. One of the best concerts I saw was at the Alpine
Valley in
Alpine
Wisconsin.
Valley.
That was based on the podcast with Jen.
Yeah, so that was Gene Loves Jezebel.
Oh, sure.
Opened up.
New Order.
Followed by New Order, and then Echo and the Bunnymen. But Bauhaus, Tones on Tail, The Church.
Depeche Mode?
No, they were a little too mainstream.
Okay.
Of course, The Cure, which they were kind of mainstream.
They built a following before that wasn't as so mainstream.
And, prior to that, back in the early 80s, I was really into REM. But as they got more and more popular, it became a little more mainstream, too. But these days, I'm drawn to anything that's unique, weird, eclectic, bizarre, out of the ordinary. I really value clever lyrics and great musicianship, so I'm always searching for stuff that on the first listen I think, oh gosh, this is weird, and then I find out by the end of the week I've listened to that song 10 times because it's actually grown on me.
So what would be current examples of that?
Current examples
of that music in terms of the stuff you're listening to right now?
Heavy rotation this last winter was, I can name the bands.
Yeah,
there's Yard Act, Do Nothing, Wet Leg.
Yeah, of those three, that's the first one I've heard of. Wet Leg's very new.
PJ Harvey was big, and I still like Southern Culture on the Skids. Reverend Horton Heat he's a little more mainstream. But interestingly, and we're all guilty of this, of going down a rabbit hole on YouTube, I stumbled on a video of this guy from Iceland named, I don't even know, Dawi Freyr is his name.
Okay.
And he's Icelandic techno pop. And I don't like pop, and I don't like techno, but he's so
good.
Bizarre.
Bizarre, different.
And he's got albums in English as well as Icelandic, and there's sections of his song that are Icelandic rap, and I'm just like, it's like, you can't look away. It's like if there's a bad car crash, you shouldn't look. It's like, I should not be listening to this music, but something about it has grabbed hold of me.
I keep going.
And I find myself driving home at work cranking this Icelandic techno pop, because it's just different.
Yeah.
So anyway.
That's neat. Yeah, let's kind of wrap up maybe with kind of some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Some thoughts on different things. The talking about the music. So then if we were to talk to your friends and peers, what would they say you're known for, or what's a signature of yours?
That I'm really mellow and I've got a goofy sense of humor, and shamefully I'm known for having the unique talent and ability to insult you without you realizing it until several days later. I'm not proud of that, but it's an interesting observation that a few people have made about me, and I don't consider myself as somebody who would want to purposefully insult someone, but if you do it in a clever way, and I had mentioned, one of my favorite scenes from Caddyshack, and it's where the judge is in the locker room with Ty, and he says, why don't you come golfing with me and Dr. Beeper? Dr. Beeper has been the club champion 3 years running, and I'm no slouch myself. And he says, oh, don't sell yourself short, Judge. You're a tremendous slouch.
And then he probably doesn't hit him for a while.
Right. So
I like this. So people might come back to you a couple days later and say, I remember when you said that was pretty funny. I didn't catch that at the moment, and I did later on.
Yeah, and I'd say, I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I must have taken that the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
You talked a little bit about music. So how about if you could get away for a while? Where would you go? What's kind of your dream spot for a week away from zoning administration?
Well, it would have to be somewhere in nature and somewhere really pretty, because I value those two things. But as I mentioned, my great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandpa in Sweden. I've never been to Sweden. I would love to go. I think my great-great-grandfather's cabin on a fjord is still in the family. And then my wife is, her ancestry is from Ireland. She's an Irish lass, red hair and freckles, and I would love to go there and check that out too.
So you're going to, right? You're going to at some point?
Yeah.
You don't need to wait till you're retired.
Well, that's true.
No.
Yeah, COVID kind of put a wrinkle in things.
Absolutely,
but we'll get there.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
You should.
Mm-hmm.
You should. So you won the lottery. What are you going to do?
I've already discussed this possibility. Well, it's not a possibility. But if that were to occur, the Eden Prairie Police Department would have to hire a new crime analyst, because I've already made a job offer to Ryan Capon, because he's like a wizard.
Yes. He's going to be on a future podcast.
Yeah.
So,
And so the job offer was I would hire him. I would establish a shadow LLC that would not have my name associated with it. His job would be to scour the daily news looking for those hard-luck stories like, my handicapped accessible van got stolen. I don't have the money to replace it. His job would be to find those, and then we would take care of that without them ever knowing where the money came from. My job would be to give it all away before I died without anybody knowing where it came from.
Where it came from, and he's helping you vet the legitimacy of all of it.
Exactly.
And able to do it anonymously.
And he'd have excellent health insurance too. I'd make sure of that.
Yeah,
too.
you would.
So,
yeah.
So
that's awesome. So you're on a desert island. What are the 3 things that you bring with you?
Oh boy, I'm into gear a lot. I like hiking and camping and climbing and all that business. So from a practical standpoint, probably a tarp, a fire steel, and a water purifier. But if I'm going to be silly about this, definitely Marianne, because she can bake a banana cream pie or a coconut cream pie, regardless if there's a tree on the island or not.
It's amazing what they got done.
Secondly, obviously the professor, because he can make a battery out of seawater and conch shells
every week.
And then not Ginger. She's too complicated. So I think I'd go with Gilligan, because everybody needs a little buddy.
Little buddy.
You could play checkers with coconut shells, whatnot. Buddy. So
Thurston Howell III would be okay as well.
No,
you didn't like him.
He's a snob.
You didn't like him. I thought she was a snob, but
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, he was also Mr. Magoo when he was not Thurston Howell III.
Right. But yeah,
good answer.
Yeah,
good answer. So Jim, I appreciate you taking the time to come on and share a little bit about your job, your background, how you got here. Appreciate the 32 years that you've been with us, and I hope for many more. Any final words before we end the episode?
Final words? You mean like advice to listeners?
Advice to listeners, yeah, whatever. This is like you're back at the radio station, and this is kind of your sign-off for the night shift.
Well, my advice would be listen more and talk less. I think everybody needs to do that, and not just listen, but hear. I don't think people take enough time. I think too many people just wait their turn to talk. But if you're talking to people, they're usually telling you a couple of stories at the same time. So I've always been fond of the phrase, it's better to have the world think you're an idiot than open your mouth and remove all doubt. So, and just be kind. Just be kind. And that ties in the things that I do every day, talking to neighbors. I tell people, every single day I tell people, a good neighbor is worth their weight in gold, and the best way to solve your problems is just talk to one another. Just go over there and talk. Chances are you guys have all these misconceptions about what the people are actually thinking. Most people don't mean malice to one another. It's just usually just lack of understanding, and that's solved through good communication. So listen.
Well said. Thank you, Jim.